Hello everybody, and welcome to Ancient Architects. Please subscribe now to get the latest ancient history news and independent research from around the world. Many of you will have heard of and listened to the Earth Ancients podcast, created and presented by research investigator and author Cliff Dunning, who has an outstanding award-winning show featuring a different guest every episode, and he also covers many different topics. I've linked the Earth Ancients website in the description below, and I would recommend the podcast to all. In mid-August 2021, the guest on the Earth Ancients podcast was researcher and friend of mine Manu Seyfzadeh, who released earlier this year an outstanding new book with a foreword by Graham Hancock titled Under the Sphinx, which I've also linked below in the description. Everyone who knows him or has read his work knows that Manu is a meticulous independent researcher, and in his new book he takes the reader on a journey to ancient Egypt, to explore what it is the Egyptians had to say about the elusive Hall of Records. If you want to learn more and discover what was in a wooden container under the Sphinx and how it affected Egyptian civilization, then I would certainly recommend this book. But as well as discussing the content in his fascinating new book, on the podcast Manu spent more than half an hour discussing the 51 images I published at the end of July, which showed the Great Pyramid Queen's Chamber northern shaft from bottom to top. Manu explains the background extremely well. He explains the importance of the pictures and recaps the anomalies, what they could imply, and how they tie into the wider pyramid puzzle. Cliff also asks all the right questions that many viewers may be asking themselves, and so I kindly asked them if I could publish the section on the Ancient Architects channel. Both Cliff and Manu agreed to my request, and Cliff sent me the footage, and that's what you'll be seeing for the rest of this video. To help the viewers along, I've annotated the video with images to help you visualise the topics of conversation, and I think you'll agree it's a fantastic piece of content. I will of course recommend you listen to the entire podcast on the Earth Ancients website. So that's enough from me, so now I'll hand you over to Cliff Dunning.
So we have a great gift for you as a part two. Again, this is Manu Seyfzadeh, and we have he has some new information on the Great Pyramid known as the Khufu Pyramid, in the Queen's Chamber, the northern shaft. Okay, Manu, it's all up to you. What is the latest?
Okay, so we had published a couple of weeks ago by a video blogger called Matt Simpson, who runs Ancient Architects. He was able to get a hold of some very precious images. And why are they precious? Well, because they weren't published for almost 20 years. Only a few of that set were published by Zaya Was in 2005, 2014. And we only have a few images, and they were grainy, not high resolution. There wasn't much to see, but that was it. So we never heard much again about this particular shaft, which comes out of the Queen Chamber and goes to the north part of the pyramid into the unknown, because we didn't know where that shaft went up until 2002, when a robot by the name of Pyramid Rover was sent up that shaft to see what's at the end of it. And if you might remember, Rudolf Gantembrink, of course, is the one who explored the southern shaft.
Oh, I didn't know Gantembrink did that. Did he do the northern shaft as well?
No. Oh. I was just going to finish. No, Gantembrink did the southern shaft in 1990. In a stint. He had 3 years in Giza, 1990, 91, 92. And I think 93 maybe, yes. And during those years, he explored the shafts that come out of the King Chamber, and he explored the southern shaft from the Queen Chamber, and he was able to advance Upuaut, his robot, into the northern shaft, but only a few meters up, because there is a bend, a 45-degree bend to the west, to the east, to the west, to the left, in other words, and his robot was not able to make that turn. Okay, so what he did, he was able to take a picture of the continuation of the shaft, but that was it. And so that was the end of the project, and he was, as you know, not allowed to come back to Egypt to continue the project with a more advanced robot. Okay, so then the project was on ice basically until 2002, and then the Pyramid Rover team came. This is National Geographic was producing it. And there was, of course, a big a TV special because it had to do with Gantenbrink's door, and the hole was drilled into Gantenbrink's door to see what's behind the door, and then they found another door or another slab of stone, right? That was basically the big television spectacle. That same mission, a few days after that television spectacle, did actually go into the northern shaft. This is the Pyramid rover. And they are the first, technically, to explore the northern shaft past the point of Upuaut, Gantenbrink, okay? So they made it past that 45-degree turn. They went all the way up the shaft, and they went to the end and found another door, just like on the southern side, okay? They took video, they took footage, pictures, whatever, but like I said, it was never published. The public never got to see, except for 2 papers that are very difficult to actually find. Those 2 papers are not easily downloadable from the internet. And so we didn't have much information. We just had this two papers via WAS, and that was pretty much it, okay? And so what Matt Simpson was able to do, he obtained screenshots from the video taken by Pyramid rover in the northern shaft of the Queen Chamber, 51 images, and he put a video together like Matt usually does. He narrates, and then he gives us observations, and he made some very keen observations, including, and now here's there's several big stories, but the biggest story is what looks like an opening in the middle of the shaft. So remember, this shaft was supposedly sealed, right? So as far as we knew, when the shaft was originally discovered by Wayman Dixon in 1872, both of these shafts on the north and south side from the Queen Chamber were sealed, okay? So that means the builders made them, they sealed them, and that was the end of it, okay? Unlike the shafts that come out of the King Chamber that are open they go outside the pyramid, okay? And you can go outside the pyramid, and Gantenbrink found the openings, and he repaired the openings, protected them, cleaned them, and did all those things. And before him, there were researchers also that went up there, and they saw the openings out of the King Chamber. But the Queen Chamber shafts, no exits, okay? No entry, no exit, until the entries were discovered. And then a few decades later, an amateur researcher, just like myself, called Morton Edgar, and his brother investigated these shafts, okay, with metal rods, okay? So they were trying to measure how deep these shafts are, and they basically shoved these metal rods up the shaft. And this is in 1928 when he did this. And he was not able to get to the end of the shaft, the northern shaft, that is. He was only able to advance it to about 175 feet, okay? So why is that? Well, because that shaft turns. Like I just said, there's a 45-degree turn to the left, then there's 2 turns to the right, and then there's another bend further up. So, it turns several times. Unlike the shaft on the other side, that is much straighter. That, incidentally, is the shaft that Robert Bouval believed pointed to Sirius. So if you remember Orion correlation, right? So when Robert Bouval found out about Gantenbrink's data, he basically modified, or he added to his theory that the Great Pyramid was, along with the other pyramids, were aligned with the Orion belt. But now he had this additional evidence that basically supported this idea that Orion mattered. And so he, just like Alexander Badawi and Virginia Trimble before him, said that these Queen Chamber shafts must be pointing also to stars. And so he proposed that the southern shaft goes to Sirius and the northern shaft goes to Kochab in Ursa Minor. Okay.
Before you go on, talk about these rods that were placed in this northern shaft.
Right.
Were they completely? Were they like a ruler or a tape measure? You just keep pushing it until you bump into something, or were
they had 2 different
attached to something?
Right. So he basically bought 16 feet rods, and they were
16-foot metal rods.
Metal rods, and then he carved a thread onto them, so he could connect them with connectors, right? And so he basically made a longer and longer rod because he didn't know how deep the shaft is. So he kept attaching new rods. And then he tells the story how he had to keep going back to the hardware store in Cairo to buy new rods because it just wouldn't end, okay?
Yeah.
So he ended up connecting 11 of these rods into 175 long combined rod. And then there was a wooden head at the end of it. And you can see that in the screenshots from in the video that Matt published, you can see that when he finally gets to the end, which is 175 feet up the shaft, you can see the wooden head screwed on top of this metal rod. Okay.
And so we should let people know that those rods are still in place,
yes,
laying in the northern shaft.
right, because they got stuck, right? So he
Yeah.
basically got those rods stuck in there, and then he wrote about it. He said, this is what happened to me. I was trying to measure it, and these rods got stuck. I couldn't get them out.
Yeah.
And so the next researchers are going to find these rods. And, he was being conscientious about it to let other people know that he put those items into the shaft. Okay.
Okay.
Unlike some other items that were recovered in 2002 that we have no idea how these items got into the shaft. Okay. This is where the mystery begins.
So go ahead and complete.
Yeah. Because in image, what is it? Image 20, I believe, or 18, 19, 20, you can see a ticket, a Giza Plateau ticket that cannot have been made earlier than 1971 or after 1993. Okay. Because the Egyptian Antiquities Organization name is printed on this ticket. It says access, whatever, to the Giza Plateau, the pyramids, and the Sphinx. Okay. And this piece of paper is way up in the shaft, 70 foot inside. And not only that, it is close to this strange shadow, this rectangular shadow that looks like an opening that we never knew existed. Okay. And Matt is the one who first, to my knowledge, Matt Simpson is the first person to publicly acknowledge that there is an opening, or that this rectangular shadow could be an opening. And so based on that, I'm calling this Simpson's window. So from now on, I'm going to refer to this as Simpson's window, subject to confirmation, of course. But he's the one who first described it a couple of weeks ago. And then he also described this ticket. That ticket, interestingly, was recovered by the Pyramid rover. And that's why we know that this ticket exists. So Zaya Was describes the ticket in his 2014 publication. There's also a plastic roller close to where the ticket is, close to Simpson's window. Is a small black plastic roller. It's clearly a modern item. It's not an ancient piece of relic. And so how did that get in there, right? So the question is, how did this piece of paper, how did this plastic piece get into the shaft 70 feet up? We know it couldn't have been Morton Edgar in 1928. It's not possible because that ticket didn't exist then, right? Mm-hmm. We know that Gantenbrink couldn't have done it in 1993 because at that time he wasn't able to get all the way into the shaft, and he didn't use rods, and he wouldn't push the paper. He wouldn't have pushed the paper into the shaft, right? Or this plastic roller. So we know it couldn't have been Gantenbrink. So that means we don't know who did it. Okay, Zaya Was, National Geographic, the iRobot team from Massachusetts with Pyramid rover, they recovered the ticket in 2002. So this ticket must have gotten into the shaft sometime between 1971 and 2002, and we have no idea how it got in there. Okay, we have no idea how this plastic roller got in there, and we have no idea what that rectangular shadow is. Is that an opening? And if it is an opening, where does it go? Cliff, you know the internal architecture of the Great Pyramid, right? You know there's nothing immediately next to the northern shaft of the Queen Chamber, right? In fact, that shaft, the reason why it is bent to the left, Egyptologists told us that the reason why it had to be bent to the left is because the Grand Gallery is running just above, right? However, the shaft is bending way more than it had to avoid the Grand Gallery. So there is something else in addition to the Grand Gallery that the builders were trying to avoid. But what is that something else? Well, this is the question I'm asking all of you. You guys should review this video and then you come up with your own ideas. I mean, of course, we've been discussing endlessly every single day. Armando May is an Italian researcher who you may know. He's an author. He's involved in the discussions. Then, Jean-Paul Bouval is Robert's brother, an architect. So, and I, myself, three of us, and then, we're on Facebook. Other people are chiming in. So and Matt Simpson, of course. So we're trying to figure out, what is this shadow? What is this opening? Why do I think this is an opening? And Matt, and why do we all think it's an opening? Well, because there's rubble, Cliff, just next to that shadow inside of the shaft, right?
Yeah, so I saw that in one of the photos. Yeah.
Right. So in addition to the paper, to the ticket, in addition to the black roller, there's this limestone debris that is not the kind of debris that you get from decay of the stone. It's not like
Yeah.
flakes, right? This is actually looks like somebody chipped away limestone and it fell into the shaft. So where does that come from? Well, it means that this is an opening that was hacked in from the outside. Well, where is the other side of the shaft? Well, it has to be a corridor. It has to be a chamber. It has to be some kind of space.
I think a lot of people are like me, and you need to clarify what I'm about to say to you or
Yeah.
ask you. We talked about the pyramid scan group and the discovery of this massive void that's about the same size as the great corridor,
The Grand Gallery.
the Grand
Yes.
Gallery.
Right.
That's not close to this shaft, is it?
It's a great question. So I have an opinion about this. Yes, the shafts, it turns out the two queen chamber shafts, the doors, right? Gantenbrink's door on the south and whatever we want to call the door on the north side, okay? I do have a name for it because I just recently tried to translate the writing that I think is on that door, but that's another thing we can talk about in a moment. So, but the ends of these two shafts are at the same level where the big void is that you just mentioned. So is there a connection? Your guess is as good as mine, but at the end of the day, we have to investigate, right? To prove it or falsify it. But it is suggestive, yes.
The Japanese-French consortium of scientists who did this unique scan, we reported about it here on the program, have not been allowed to investigate that void any further. The idea was, after identification, a unique drone would be created and flown in there to see what is in this space.
Yeah. Right.
We don't know if they'll ever get a chance to find out. It upsets so many people, including Lerner and Hawass and many others who what was confounding is that when this shaft was found, not the shaft, but this space, people like Hawass were like, well, so what? So what?
Yeah. Right.
Well, it could be a huge discovery.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. Well, there's two ways that I think you could get in. Okay. One is behind the chevrons. If the scan data are correct, there is actually a corridor just behind the chevrons.
Yeah,
and
I've seen that.
Yeah. So there could be, all you may have to do is to push the block that's above the mountain sign, right? So when you stand in front of the chevrons, there's a block that looks like the mountain sign, the hieroglyphic sign for mountain. And just above that, there's a block. That is, behind that block is where this signal comes from, okay? So I bet you that if you could move that block out of the way, you could access that system if it exists. That's one way. The other way, which is even easier, I think, is the king chamber. So I don't know if you know this, Cliff, but when Piazzi Smith described the king chamber, he found a hole in the northwest corner of the king chamber, in a hole in the floor, basically. And Matt Simpson, again, a couple of months ago, published a video where he found two images that were taken from inside of this hole. And it's incredible. That hole actually goes down a couple of meters. So you were saying, how people were standing in various holes around the Sphinx, right? Well, you could stand and completely disappear in the floor of the king chamber. Now, of course, it's been cemented over. But before, you could have stood there. And interestingly, there is a brick wall on the west side of this underground space. Why is there a brick wall? Those bricks are not made by the ancient Egyptians, okay?
Yeah.
So what does that mean? Does that mean there's something behind that brick wall that had to be covered up? Who knows? But if there's an access to this whole system that we don't know about, I bet you can access it from the king chamber.
It's funny because you bring up something quite interesting. The images of this shaft and the northern shaft in the Queen's Chamber shows freshly cut granite. It looks fairly fresh. It doesn't look very old. And I'm just curious.
You mean limestone? You mean limestone?
Limestone,
right?
yeah. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
But it's like it's new enough. Like somebody's been cutting away somewhere,
I agree.
and it's fallen into the shaft. It's like.
Yes.
And Hawass is saying he doesn't know about it. It's like,
well, I mean, you know what, Cliff? At this point, I don't want to point fingers. I don't want to say.
I'm not saying anything. I'm just saying it's like
Yeah, who I don't know what he
You
knows,
know?
what he doesn't know. All I'm saying is that there's a lot of questions with unanswered. There's a lot of unanswered questions, right? As you just pointed out, right? We can't use this, we can't use this method, that method, right? And
Yeah.
you rightfully ask, why not, right? I completely agree with you. All you and I can do is ask the question, okay? And
Yeah.
then the Egyptian government has to decide if it wants to
My
pursue this.
worst fear, Manu, my worst fear is that because of the embarrassment, because of the potential for uncovering historical documents that change our history,
Yes.
this is a reason for a clandestine team to get in there drilling or cutting away.
Do you remember Planet of the Apes, 1968, Charlton Heston?
Yeah.
That's exactly the story of what you just said. Okay, that
Oh,
when
covering
he,
up. Yeah, you're
yeah,
right. Yeah.
that's why I put that in the book, right? So this, when I Cliff, when I saw this painting, okay, I felt like Taylor on the beach. So it's looking at the Statue of Liberty. This is the chills that were running over my spine when I looked at this painting. Okay, because I'm saying this is incredible. I'm looking at something that doesn't belong in this place in history. Okay, and I was just as flabbergasted as this. I had the same emotion that you were just expressing. Yes, I agree with you. They might worry about chaos, about turmoil. Who knows what they're worried? I have no idea. I look at this scientifically. For me, I'm not afraid. See, this is the thing. When you're a scientist, you're not afraid to find out things. You boldly go where no one has gone before, to quote a famous captain. Okay. Well, he used to say no man, and then that was politically incorrect. So it was changed to no one. Okay. But
Yeah.
you are not afraid, because this is a part of being human. Human beings are curious. This is what we do. This is in our DNA. Okay. So for us to be told that we're not allowed to investigate something, it's against our nature. So we are rightfully upset about it. I completely agree with what you're saying. I am just, as frustrated. But you know what? I'm trying to be pragmatic about it. I'm trying to move forward. I'm not trying to step on anybody's feet. Okay. I understand that history, archaeology, they're politically, and by the way, in our paper, in the Fisher paper, and also in my chapter 11, I get into that, why archaeology and anthropology are so politically tainted. Okay. Where's that coming from? So I do have an analysis about this, but they are, right? So, but I don't want to get into politics, right? I'm just saying, I'm a scientist. Okay. Here's what we see. You do with that whatever you want. Okay. I can't force you to investigate the Great Pyramid. I can't. I can only lay this in front of you, and then you decide what you want to do with it. Okay. That's my job, Cliff.
Mhm.
And so that's
Yeah.
it.
So for our listening audience, I am going to post this ancient architect video that shows this data, has the debris in this northern shaft. You, Manu, have given us a hint of the anomalous, whatever that is, the particles that are in the shaft that are fairly fresh. You don't know how it got there. The news is, I guess, the news is the fact that there's something going on. Is that it?
Yeah, yeah. The debris that you're referring to is close to this rectangular shadow. And so one way to interpret it is that the shadow is a hole, and in the process of making this hole, this debris was introduced into the shaft. Okay. Now there's one other type of debris that I have to mention, because it's fascinating. If you go further up the shaft, past the head of the last rod, okay, there's two rods. The longest one, 175 feet, just a few feet past the head of that rod, you will see something that looks like metal, Cliff. It's incredible. They are like these chips. They're straight, flat, completely flat. Okay. They're shiny. There's a reflection as if it's metal. I don't know if it's metal, but it looks like it could be. And there are several of these pieces lying in one area of the shaft. Okay. That's another huge piece of mystery. And then there's another mystery close to where the end of that rod is. There's it looks like a wooden object, a wooden rod that has a spear tip or something like that tied to it. That looks like an ancient object. Okay. In
Mm-hmm.
fact, that could be the wood from which the Dixon wood came. This is what I'm thinking. It's possible, right? The Dixon wood, if you remember, that's the one that Robert Bauval discovered after it was lost, basically, right? And he traced it back to Aberdeen, and then it was recently carbon dated to something like between 2900 and 3300 BC. And I think that wooden object that's in the northern queen shaft, that's way up there, that could be where that piece of wood came from. So that's another big mystery. So see, we have what, 5 mysteries already? We have the rectangular shadow, we have the ticket, we have the plastic roller, we have the rubble that you just mentioned, we have this strange metal looking debris, and then we have, which I haven't mentioned yet, we have something that looks like writing on the door. Okay.
So what's that? What?
Yeah.
So there's another blockage before you get to the rest of the shaft, which is a door.
There is, as far as we know, the shaft ends with another door. Yes. So,
Okay.
and that door is very similar, but it's not exactly the same as Gantenbrink's door, because there's 2 handles, but one of the handles is sunken in the slab, the other one is sticking out. Okay. And there's an interesting corrosion that you can see, and I'm sure that Christopher Dunn is going to have a field day with this, right? Because there's some corrosion, there's some discoloration of the limestone that you can see, and the sunken
Let me just
electrode.
stop you right there. You mentioned Chris Dunn. Chris Dunn believes that the doors have copper on them, and then it was some form of
Electrodes, yeah.
combustion that was distributed into the body of the Great Sphinx, or the Great Pyramid, to create some form of energy.
Yeah, right. And I don't want to speak for Christopher Dunn. I have a general idea of what he's saying. And in fact, there's one of his colleagues called Eric Wilson recently even explained the big void. And you know what? The interesting thing about the Christopher Dunn theory is that he's an engineer. He's looking at machines. He's looking at how do you design a machine, right?
Yeah.
And that's kind of what Robert Bauval was saying in Cosmic Womb, right? That one way to interpret the Great Pyramid, that it's a blueprint that was inherited esoterically, and then they tried to build this machine, but they didn't really know what it is that they're building, right? And it actually never really worked.
Well,
but
no, that's not it. If you read Dunn, he believes that there's a whole bunch of mechanics missing.
Yeah.
In the Great
Yeah.
Gallery, there's
Right.
these pits
Right.
on the either side of the walkway. He believes there were
Right.
they were housings for various
Yeah, I'm just
apparatus.
trying to explain that you have different authors that are coming at this from different angles, but
Right.
the
Yeah.
same thing, right? They're
Yeah.
basically saying it's a machine, right?
Yeah.
And so, but so there's something useful, regardless of if you agree or not, but there's something useful that comes out of this, is because when you build a structure like this with this complicated internal architecture, you're basically like a tiny little worker inside of this gigantic machine, and you're building it, right? Like a nano robot, basically. And so the way that you build it, right, and part of the engineering of building it may involve similar concepts as the concepts that you apply when you build a machine. So I think there's some interesting insight here by Christopher Dunn, by Robert Bauval, right? And I think those ideas are worth considering when you try to analyze the architecture, which is what we are doing, right? So Jean-Paul Bauval is an architect, and him and I, we looked at the architecture of the Great Pyramid, and we think that the Fibonacci numbers, for example, were used in designing it, the Horus numbers, the 2-to-1 triangle, and we published this as a video on my YouTube channel. So what I'm saying is that all these authors, we all come at this from different angles, but there is a truth where an element of all these theories may come together in the center. And I think that's why these theories it's worth to consider, even if you don't agree with all of the theory. And this is what Graham Hancock says all the time, is you might disagree with the whole entire theory, but that doesn't mean you should dismiss it wholesale.
Yeah.
Because there may be elements in the theory that are really useful.
Yeah,
okay?
I agree with that.
Yeah.
One of the things, and I'd like to hear from you on this one, is that, when Robert Bauval says that these shafts in the Great Pyramid are pointing to star clusters, star constellations.
Yes.
I've always had trouble with that, because here is this, and I've been inside the Great Pyramid. It is enormous. Right. It is obscenely huge. And when you walk up against it and you're looking at it from the outside, you're going, how in the hell did they build this? This is a megalithic. This is the ultimate megalithic culture. So my question is, having shafts point to star constellations is a nice design element, but for a machine, that doesn't really help any of the combustion or anything that Dunn brings up. So I think that those shafts had something other to do
Well,
with a mechanism over an aesthetic kind of a design feature.
yes, right. So you're looking at it pragmatically, practically, and Robert Bouval was looking at it ideologically,
Yeah.
based on the religions. But there is even there is a synthesis possible, because imagine, right? What if the Great Pyramid is a resurrection machine, right? Or it's a
Yeah.
consciousness projection machine. Let's say, I mean, we're gonna just speculate,
I
right?
like that resurrection machine.
Yeah. Well, we're gonna I'm just gonna let loose right now, right? I'm not
Yeah.
gonna be a scientist. I'm just gonna go wild right now. Let's say the Great Pyramid was built to extract the conscious element in the body and project it outward into the universe. Okay.
Right.
Well, there you go. Now you have Christopher Dunn basically describing one side of the equation and Robert Bouval the other side of the equation. Okay. And it even fits with what the ancient Egyptians believed in terms of the afterlife, right?
Yeah.
Because
As above, so below.
as
Yeah.
above, so below, that Osiris or Orion is the resurrection power, right? Or Osiris rather is the resurrection power, and that the king, the soul of the king, eventually wants to go to the north. And if you look at the pyramid text, you look at the coffin text, that's exactly what the texts are saying, that they wanted to resurrect and then migrate to the northern zone to become immortal, because those stars never die. Okay. And the pyramid is basically that bridge, right? Think of it as, you go to the south, you resurrect, you become a star soul, and then you transfer over to the north side, and that's where you become immortalized in the what's it called, the circumpolar star zone, right? And you can incorporate all these theories from all these authors into this overarching theory. Okay, it's possible. Yeah. It doesn't have to be either or.
Thank you very much for watching this episode of Ancient Architects. If you enjoyed the video, please subscribe to the channel, please like the video, and please leave a comment below. Thank you very much.